Hello, story lovers and history buffs, and welcome to the first episode of the Chuchu Blema Sunny podcast with me, Buki. I love a good story. That is the reason why I have started this podcast. As Africans, we usually tell our stories orally. And when we tell our folk tales orally, usually it changes from person to person. And everybody who tells the tale leaves a little piece of themselves within it, something that is seen as human error because we all perceive things differently and we all remember things differently. Like, Chinese whispers is a really good example of that. If you've ever played Chinese whispers, you realize that by the time that the word gets to the end of the person in the room, it's completely changed. So we tell our stories orally and everybody leaves a piece of themselves within it. I started this podcast because I also want to tell our stories, leave a little piece of myself in it, and document my family's history and Africa's rich history. So I'll be giving you folk tales, folklore, history, and then we'll chat a little bit about like current events and things that are going on around the continent. When it comes to history, we will keep it factual, but with the stories that I tell on this pod, I will rework them into my own version. So I leave a little piece of myself within the story. Now, when my grand auntie told me this version, she had mixed up the two stories. So this story is, I think, an originally Ga story, this particular story that I'm about to tell. But there is also another version of it in the Yoruba community as well. When she told it to me, she thought she was telling me the Yoruba one, but upon checking, we found out that the Yoruba one is a little bit different. Like it's actually not, it's a little bit different. I'll just say a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is I'm still going to tell you this one because I think this one is amazing and I reworked it as well. So it's not even the original one she told me. I've also reworked it into my version. I've titled it Not a Single Soul. Let's get into it. There once lived a married woman who wanted a child but could not have one. We'll call her Jumoke. Jumoke woke up that morning with a knot in her chest. She sat up to see her husband sitting at the foot of their bed with his head in his hands. She already knew what was on his mind. She wished she could slowly lower herself back to sleep, but he had already turned around and was looking at her directly with a mixture of sadness and anger. I've had enough, he said. You must leave today. Jumoke knew this day was coming. When they'd first gotten married, there was a lot of patience for her not getting pregnant. He always had excuses for family, friends, or neighbors who tried to berate her, and since fertility tests hadn't been invented yet, it became her burden to carry the blame for their childlessness. After 10 years, it was only right that he was tired. We cut to Jumoke walking on the dusty roads in her village with a bag on her shoulder and tears streaming down her face. The village people watch her and some even comfort her on the way. No one offers her a place to stay though, because somehow she ends up at the river and decides to sit for a drink of water. Before she can reach into the river, a woman wrapped in a golden colored cloth and a crown made of solid gold on her freely grown dreadlocks appears before her. Jumoke, in her sorrow, isn't nearly as shocked as she should be at this gravity defying woman and continues to sob and reach into the lake for sips of water. The woman, we'll call her Oshun, asks, Why are you crying? Instead of screaming and running for dear life, Jumoke went on a 10-minute trauma dump about her marriage and inability to have children, even though it had been something she'd always wanted. He might be the problem, Oshun chimed in. Too consumed with her sorrow to hear that tidbit, Jomoke went on to tell Oshun she intended to kill herself. All but rolling her eyes, the river goddess said, Don't do that. I will give you a child, but you mustn't tell a single soul where the child comes from, and you'll have to bring her back to me. when she turns 21. Jumoke hastily agreed, seeing nothing but her baby finally resting in her arms. I won't tell a single soul, not a single soul. Oshun hands her a pineapple and tells her to put it on her back and it will eventually turn into a baby. Jumoke gladly put the pineapple on her back, spouting 1,000 thank yous to the river goddess. Don't forget what I told you. I won't tell anybody, not a single soul, Jumoke replied, glossing over the very important last part of bringing the child back when she was 21. She was already headed back home to beg her husband to take her back. Oshun shook her head, knowing that Jumoke would funk this up somehow, and went back to whatever river gods love to do in their free time. Pan right to a passerby in the distance watching the interaction quietly. They slink behind a tree in a manner that your textbook village gossip would, off to do God knows what with the information they had gathered. Jumoke is seen with the pineapple on her back, and I imagine everyone looking at her, not sure if she'd finally lost her marbles. In a while, much to everyone's surprise, Jumoke's stomach started to grow. Once everyone was satisfied that it wasn't a fake cloth belly, the village jubilated with her. After months of unsolicited advice on the joys and woes of motherhood, praises about finally becoming a real woman, and how she should already be preparing for baby number two, she had a beautiful baby girl. We'll call her Lara. Between her mother and father, Lara was almost spoiled and never lacked anything. Jumoke never let her out of her sight as a baby, maybe with the last part of Oshun's stipulations running through her mind finally. 21 years was a long way away, and she would exchange her life for Lara's if she had to. When Lara started to walk, they would take her to the farm with them. She would run around and play with the forest creatures, never afraid of anything that frightened even her parents. She was even spotted once holding a snake, Hercules style, after it had tried to attack her father. Her father was proud of her, and he was heard saying, that Lara will be a great woman one day. A natural born leader and always ready to help, she volunteered within her community and tutored the younger children in the village in her teens. Known to tie a mean rapper, she hosted little fashion events during the village festivals. As the years continued to pass, she became a loved and treasured member of her community. When her 21st birthday approached, the village decided to plan a big birthday surprise to celebrate. The irony wasn't lost on Jumoke as she listened to the representatives sent to tell her about the party plans. She begged them not to. And after a ton of back and forths with the villagers and her husband, but having no explanation as to why the party wouldn't be a good idea, she sheepishly agreed. It might not be a bad idea having everyone there. Oshun was less likely to show up if there were a whole bunch of people there, right? Right? Everyone went about planning the party, and as the day inched closer and closer, Jumoke became more and more paranoid. Mummy, are you okay? Lara asked Jumoke, walking into the room and finding her mother staring off into the distance with a look of fear in her eyes. Jumoke rose and went to hug her. I love you so much, my child. I am so proud of you, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. I love you too. Why are you crying? Lara asked. For a moment, Jumoke could have sworn she saw Oshun's face in Lara's eyes. The next day, a day before her birthday, Lara woke up early to prep for laundry day. She packed up her clothes and headed for the river with her parents, still sleeping in from a hard day at the farm the previous day. She loved going to the river early because she got to wash in silence. When she got there, it was just how she liked it, and she sang to herself as she washed. Singing too loudly to hear the footsteps approaching, she was startled by a boy's reflection in the river beside her. You have grown into a beautiful young woman, he said. Lara tried to dispatch him as quickly as she could, so she could go back to the peaceful morning she'd planned for herself. After a couple more tries at a conversation, he became offended by her non compliance and, in typical F boy fashion, started to get passive aggressive. You're not all that. Actually, you're not even real. You're just a pineapple child, he remarked. Never having heard that before, she brushed it off as a bruised ego. So then leave me alone, Lara rebuffed. The boy was upset, and he walked away muttering under his breath. Lara couldn't help but think about what the boy had said. Men, they'd say anything after being rejected. Like, obviously, she wasn't a pineapple. He was just pained. Somehow, though, she couldn't get the comment out of her mind. The village had done well keeping the party plans from her, and her mother was to get her out of the hut while they set up in the morning. Lara found herself unable to sleep that night and lay on her mat thinking. Her birthday was a couple of hours away, and she should have been happy. She was sure her mother had something planned for her. She said something about them going to the market in the morning. Everyone had gone on and on about how 21 was a milestone, that she had become a woman now. She hoped she wouldn't have to start seeing suitors. That thought took her back to the river incident. Why had that boy called her that? She decided she'd ask her mother when they went to the market. It would be the best solution for the questions plaguing her mind. She decided to take a walk since she couldn't sleep. She got outside and was surprised to find her mother there, walking around chanting. Mummy, are you okay? You should be sleeping, Jumoke said, trying to put on a happy mask as she spotted Lara. The birthday girl always gets to sleeping. I have too much on my mind, Lara said. Jumoke looked at her, worried. Are you okay, my child? Jumoke asked. Lara wasn't sure if it was the time to bring it up. Something clearly was already bothering her mother, and she'd been acting stranger than usual lately. You can talk to me, my child. What is wrong? Jumoke pressed. A boy at the river called me a pineapple child. I think it's because I didn't want to talk to him, but I can't stop thinking about it. What does that mean? Jumoke froze immediately and felt dread filling her chest. Seeing the look in her mother's eyes, Lara realized that her mother knew exactly what she was talking about. Mummy, tell me, what does it mean? Lara asked again. Shh. We'll wake your father, Jumoke pleaded. Tell me, now. Jumoke broke down in tears. The jig was up. Taking her hands in hers, she began to sing a song about her childlessness, about how she had taken a drink at the river and had been given a pineapple that had turned into a child. Before Jumoke could finish the song, Lara bolted away from their hut and her mother. Jumoke ran after her, calling frantically, but Lara was determined to find answers from the river. Like, how have I been washing here this many years and never seen this river god myself? And how do pineapples turn into babies? Jumoke screamed for Lara to listen to her, that she was her child and not a pineapple child. She begged for them to go back home. Lara ran fast. All these years she lived with her parents, she'd always known she was different, but it had never occurred to her that she might originally be a fruit. Thoughts swirling in her head, she didn't see when she reached the river bank and couldn't stop before slowly falling in, wondering if she would find the answers to the questions of where she'd come from at the bottom of the river. Trying but failing to steady herself, she heard footsteps pounding on the ground behind her closer and closer. It was Jumoke, reaching out, trying to save her precious pineapple child. She lost her balance and fell into the river with Lara, remembering what Oshun had said 21 years ago. The water swallowed them both, never to be seen or heard from again. Lara's father and the villagers would be seen every year on her birthday, mourning at the riverside. auntie told me the story. She had an old woman who met the woman crying on the way. The old woman happened to be a river goddess, and she met the woman crying on the way out, and she offered her the pineapple. She put it on her back, and then it turned into a baby. And eventually, when the girl finds out about her origins, she runs and falls into the river on her own. So with my version, I added the part about the mother following her child and falling in with her. It felt very poetic and seemed like very on brand for the character. I also added the part about the villagers mourning her every year. I added the age. I made the age specific. There was no specific age, and all the dialogue was assumed by me. Now let's get into the other versions. The Yoruba version is called Olurumbi and the Iroko tree, and it goes like this. A very long time ago, there was a village where many of the women were barren. They desperately wanted children and decided to ask the spirit that lived inside the big Iroko tree for help. One by one, they went to visit the Iroko tree to beg the Iroko tree spirit for help. The Iroko tree asked each of the women who showed up what she would give in return for bearing a child. And woman after woman promised the Iroko tree goats, yams, hand-woven clothes, or whatever it was she sold for a living, as many of these women were traders who sold their wares at a weekly market in the open field. One of the women, who was named Olurumbi, also approached the Iroko tree for help. She was so desperate for a child that when the Iroko tree spirit asked her what she would give in return for the child, she eagerly offered her firstborn child. Before the year ran out, many of the women had given birth to children and returned to the Iroko tree to fulfill their various promises. When it was time for Olorumbi to fulfill her promise, she went to the Iroko tree and pleaded her case. She could offer the Iroko tree everything, anything else but her child. But the tree spirit would not be swayed and took the child despite Olorumbi's cries and pleas. Since then, the villagers have sung this song as a reminder of the event. Oníròǹbí jẹ́jẹ́ òmùrẹ́ 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 oníròǹbí jẹ́jẹ́ àgùtọ̀ 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 oníròǹbí jẹ́jẹ́ ọmọrẹ́ ọmọrẹ́ kọ́bí oko oníròǹbí ò gọ́ingọ́in orókò gọ́ingọ́in oníròǹbí ò gọ́ingọ́in orókò gọ́ingọ́in. I found this version on allfolktales.com. Other versions are pretty much similar, just maybe more in depth. The Ga Adangbe version of the story goes like this. A man and his wife couldn't have a child. He took another wife, a younger woman who ended up also not being able to bear him a child because, duh, he was the problem. One day, he goes to the farm with his senior wife to cut pineapple. The pineapple shouts, "Don't kill me, don't kill me. If you don't kill me, I will give you a child." His wife decides not to cut the pineapple, and a little pineapple near them turns into a baby. The pineapple tells them not to tell anyone where they got the baby from, and they enthusiastically agree, taking her home. The younger wife has a million questions when they get home, but the man tries to keep it on the down low. Obviously, she never lets go because, huh? And she keeps asking him as the child continues to grow. He decides to tell her, but swears her to secrecy. One day, when her parents are out, the pineapple child asks her stepmother for food to eat. She ignores her. "If my mother was here, she would give me food," she retorted at her stepmother. "Get away! Aren't you just a pineapple child?" her stepmother angrily shouted back. Very hurt, the pineapple child set off for the farm crying and singing. Adeneche laike, adeneche gomobi, adeneche mi bloko mebi, adene mi a bloko memo, adene adene. Stressed, the younger wife followed behind her, trying to stop her.
Her parents see the scene and follow. She walked into the farm, and before she could turn into a pineapple, her dad reached out for her and grabbed her hair, pulling it and pressing it to his chest. It is said that this is why men have chest hair. So do with that what you will. Yeah. There's also another version similar to the rendition I told, which is in the book called The West African Folktales book, collected and translated by Jack Berry, and it's called Adene and the Pineapple Child. The synopsis for the story is basically an old woman counsels a childless couple to pick a talking pineapple and take it home. 3 days later, the pineapple transforms into a beautiful baby girl. They raise the child with love and care. One day, the child is left at home in Adene. An older girl who lives with the family teases the child about her origins. Deeply hurt, the child returns to the land of the pineapples. Her father tries to catch up with her, but just before he reaches her, she returns to her old place on the pineapple plant.
I think today's story tells a tale of the paths that desperation can lead you down. We have a lot of stories like this where a person trying to fight against a revelation about the future only aids it in coming to pass. And also, another thing that stood out to me was how the women were bearing the brunt of the childlessness. And it's like we still see that today, especially in African families. I'm sure worldwide as well, but it's like here we really see it's like women have to bear the brunt of a married couple's childlessness, whether it's the man or it's the woman will get blamed. Nobody blames the man. Like even in the second version in the story when his younger wife can't give birth, nobody says, "Uncle, you might be the problem." And he most definitely probably was. And even just them putting that in there, I'm not sure if the it was just like them slightly alluding to the fact that he might be the problem. I mean, that's the way I'm choosing to interpret it because once he took a second wife as well and she couldn't have a baby, it is most likely that he was the problem. What I have noticed in all of these stories that I keep hearing is just how much we haven't changed as a society, as a civilization. I mean, now we're like a global village. There's so much information out there, but it's like we're still I mean, not still in the same place. We have moved forward a little bit, but it's like we still see the same types of situations happening today. It's kind of sad. It would be nice to see some sort of change. And because there's a river in the story, just a little reminder: stop Galamsey now. Galamsey is still going on right now. I traveled outside of Accra. I saw people mining during the day. All the water bodies as you are moving across is brown. I think it was just my village, which is Benin in the Ashanti region, that I felt like I saw clean water bodies. And with this new government coming in, I'm hoping that there's going to be change. But what I'm seeing right now is that the Western Region Minister for NDC is saying that he's going to expose all government officials, and they're saying that the funds that were invested in the fight against Galamsey, they're going to audit it, and that's amazing. Like, let us know the culprits, please. But what are we going to do to stop it before all we have flowing through our taps is brown water? Already in my house, when the water goes off and it comes back on, it comes brown first and then it starts to come a bit clear. I've seen loads of videos of people turning on their taps and it's just brown water that just keeps coming out. It's something that we're still going to have to focus our 2025 on because just talking about it is not enough. Just auditing the people who are behind it is not enough. Like, what measures are we going to put in place to make sure that it is stopped? Mining gold is not a problem. It's not a problem. And I understand that because times are so hard, the local people who are involved, because of the money that they get from it, it's hard to tell them to stop. So all we need to do is find safer ways to do it. That's all. Whatever the case be, water no get enemy. If your child die, now water you go use. And that's not just hyperbole, that is a fact. Stop Galam saying now. Let's protect our water bodies.
The end of the first episode of the Chuchu Blema Sunday podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will be bringing you episodes bi weekly. You can follow us on Instagram, TBS daily underscore AFT, or you can email us at chuchublemasane@gmail.com. I would love to hear any other versions of the stories you hear on here, or just any other thoughts you have. You can also send in your original short stories and they will be featured on the pod. Like, I just want us to, what I want to do with this is just get the storytelling going. We have a lot of really good stories, folklore, folk tales, history. It's rich. And I know there are other pods that do this, but I really, really want to focus on stories that haven't really been heard that much, or also on stories that are like monumental to who we are as a people and our culture. So I'll be looking forward to hearing from you guys and hearing your stories and giving you more stories. In a fortnight, we'll be talking about why the agama lizard nods its head. Now, that one I'm sure everybody has heard. It's a very common Anansi story, but I will have my own twist on the story. Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show. The show is produced by Nikita Kowalski. The stories are collected, researched, and written by me. The show music is by Andre Ayete, and the orator of today's story is my grand auntie Bernice Omotayo Ward Brew. Thank you for listening, and until next time, tree blow. Take it easy. This has been the Chuchu Blame Asani podcast, sharing truly African stories.